Hello and welcome to today's episode of Courage Permission Slip. I, of course, am your host, Kia, and today I am so excited and honored to welcome my friend, former collaborator, Rashad Sharif to the show. And before we get started, I want to tell you just a little bit more about him. Rashad was a senior lead officer and is now a reserve officer for the Los Angeles Police Department. During his time at the LAPD, he's gone undercover, worked during the 1992 Los Angeles Riots, also referred to as the Los Angeles Uprising. He was named West Los Angeles Officer of the Year in 2012 and worked in the community engagement section, which coordinates Days of Dialogue, which is actually, fun fact, how I met Rashad, which then we went on to partner when I was the marketing director at the Los Angeles Conservation Corps, of developing a series of Days of Dialogues for them. So Rashad, I am so excited that you are here. Thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you, Kia. It's good to be here. Good to see you. I miss having you here, but I'm glad we were able to connect. And Zoom is a great thing. You can be hundreds of miles away and feels like I'm in your living room, sitting on the couch behind you.
That's right. That's right. Oh, so exciting. So, I have so many questions that I want to ask you. And, I think especially I'm curious about this just because of the state of the relationship with the police and the community right now. But, you were full-time LAPD for over 30 years. And I'm interested to hear from you. What was it that really made you want to become a police officer?
Well, when I think I was 4 or 5 years old, my grandmother, we went to a department store and I would always hide in the clothing racks and she'd always be looking for me. And I was like, Granny, I'm a secret agent. So her and my cousin always says, oh, we knew you were going to be a cop when you were 5 years old because you used to play secret agent all the time. So I can remember sometimes on my way to school and sitting on the bus thinking, okay, what do I want to do with my life? I'm 15, I'm 16. So even before that, I thought about being in law enforcement. But as I got into high school, I said, I want a job that's exciting, somewhere where I won't have to sit in the office all the time. And I'll tell you a story. So one of the areas I lived as a youngster, we lived in South LA, right off Crenshaw. And there was a pursuit on my street. So we're in the house and we're hearing all this cop cars going around and around and around. So we actually went outside and it was my neighbors. It was his older brother. He got chased by the police. So the cars crashed in the front lawn and the cops all chased him in the house, down the block and everything. And everybody on the street, and I think I was 17 or 18 at the time. And everybody on the street was like, oh man, I wonder what he did. Maybe he robbed a bank. I don't know, maybe this. And I says, you know what? I don't want to be here guessing about what happened. I want to actually know what happened. So I says, you know what? I'm going to be a cop and I want to be here in my city, here in Los Angeles. Yeah. So, throughout the times, growing up, you think law enforcement, and during those times, talking about in the, 70s, you really didn't hear a lot generally in the mainstream about, oh, law enforcement is a, bad profession. Now, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later on, it's a lot different. So back then, there was not a lot of discouraging of law enforcement as much as it is now.
Yeah. So interesting that you bring that up, and I'll go right to that now because Days of Dialogue, which is still going on, and so I attended one recently, and in that Days of Dialogue, I was in the room with a number of new recruits, and each and every one of those recruits, they were all women, each and every one of them said that their family, they've lost friends. They have family members that are like, I don't want to talk to you. Like they were really angry about their decision. And you know, I certainly understand that. And thinking about someone going into a really dangerous profession, I'm like, I wonder about setting some of those attitudes aside in, in support of at least the safety and the well-being of your family member or friend or what have you. But, bringing it back to you and, and your experience, especially in this time of social media. And I'm curious to hear from you if friends and family of yours that are not in law enforcement, if you have been in conflict with them because of the perception that the police have now in, in the mainstream culture.
Well, when I first joined the police department back in 1989, I went home and told my dad, and he was not pleased. And he was like, he said, the cops, they don't like Black people, and we got issues with them. I don't think you should do it. And I said, Dad, I know I can go on here and everything you taught me, I can change it. I can do all this stuff. I'm gonna be a good cop, Dad. I'm gonna make you proud or whatever. So that was, it wasn't, what I didn't know what to expect, but I knew my dad probably, our community, growing up in the African-American community and being Muslim, there was a lot of issues with the police, especially in Los Angeles. My family, we came from Michigan. So that was my first introduction. And then while I was in the academy, I ran into one of my friends, my best friend from elementary school. And I was in a department store and buying a suit because they told you, hey, you got to have a suit. So I'm buying a suit. He's like, oh man, what you doing? I'm like, I'm buying a suit. So for what? He's like, oh, I'm in the LAPD academy. He said, what? He said, you're a pig? Like, man, I ain't got nothing to say to you. And he walked away from me. Now, again, this is in 1989. I was surprised that, and I have not talked to him to this day. I talked to his brother. I talked to his other best friends. I would love to, maybe I'll reach out to him. But so that kind of just told me, hey, are you sure about this profession? And now, so currently, I actually have nothing but good things to say about people that know my profession, because most of the feedback I get are from people that says, hey, I know you're in a tough profession, and I know not all cops are bad. And people just encourage me to, hey, I know you're a good guy. You keep doing what you're doing. I'm not sure about the other cops you work with.
So, one thing that we don't hear a lot of, and you, me, and Kirk, and like we've all talked about this, in our private circle, and but we don't hear perspective from Black police officers a lot, if at all. And I mean, you've kind of hinted at this, especially with the way that your dad reacted, the way that your friend reacted. And I'm curious to hear from you, what is it like to walk, or what has it been like? And, especially as we got into, the Trump era and all that garbage, my political views are not a secret. So, leave that there. But, I'm curious to hear from you. What is it like for you? I know you can't speak for other Black officers, but what is it like to walk that thin line of being blue, right? Like being on the blue side, but then also being Black. And then also, and maybe, there's a perspective from, being Muslim, but then also being a Black police officer. I mean, there's a lot of intersection there. And so I'm really interested to hear what your personal perspective has been. I mean, obviously you've lost a friend. Your dad was at odds with you when you first joined the academy. Just curious to hear what it's been like.
Well, it's been stages. So back in 1992, when we had the civil unrest, the LA riots, that was, people were just mad about the Rodney King beating, about the trial. So there was a sense of the cops, Black, white, whatever race, Hispanic. It was just like people were just mad at cops. Now we get into this new 2015 and up, where we see, you know, mostly young Black men being involved in deadly force situations with cops. And it's majority of the Black cops that I know, we feel the same way. We understand why people are protesting. We know that there's been injustice going on. We know that the justice system has not always treated African Americans fairly. So when we were out here, headquarters, I was at headquarters right across from City Hall, and we had thousands of people protesting. And all the Black officers, like, man, if we was off, we'd be out there protesting too. That's how we felt, because, you know, we know that there's been some inconsistencies and disparage of treatment. So the tough part would be when your coworkers who are not African Americans didn't understand why the people were out there protesting. It's not that they hate the police. There's, you know, very few people say, oh, I don't like the police. They don't like what was going on, different incidents. Yes, if there was a cop that shot an unarmed man, I'm gonna be pissed just like everybody else, you know, would be. But I still had encouragement from the Black community, because they were happy to see an African American, someone that kind of went through, that knows why they're there. I know why y'all are protesting. You're not protesting because you hate cops. You're protesting because you're tired of seeing, you know, young Black men being killed. So it's hard, you know, to engage in conversation when the person doesn't even see they won't see your side of, you know, where you're coming from, your Black side. It's like, hey, and all the African Americans, all of us have been stopped before we were cops, after we were cops, been stopped.
While you're cops.
While we're cops, exactly. And I'm sure Kirk, told you the story. So there's been some stories out there, so that it makes it tough. And, you know, for a while there, especially right after the George Floyd, I dreaded coming to work, because I really didn't want to deal with the rhetoric and the vitriol that was going back and forth, because now people took hard lines. Either you're for the police or you're against the police, and there was no in between. And I'm in between.
Right. So Rashad, let me ask you, because, you know, you talked about how, you know, the white cops, and maybe even other cops of color that are not Black, you know, I think it's important to make that distinction, because there's a lot of like anti-Black POC. But, you know, for the cops that are not Black, in your experience, and when I ask this question, I think about back to when we were doing Days of Dialogue, and how there were cops, white cops, that were not interested in coming and talking to my young people, which were all Black and brown kids. They were not interested. And so to me, I mean, first of all, that pissed me off, because like, you have an opportunity to come in here and build up, you know, be able to have a conversation in an environment where that's what we're coming here to do. You have an opportunity to start shifting that narrative, to start shifting the perception, at least for that one person. And so those police decided to not do that, which to me, that felt like a slap in the face. I'm just going to be really freaking honest. I felt like a slap in the face. And so for the police officers that, you know, that you work side by side with, you know, that maybe have even been partners in, you know, the summer of 2020 and thereafter, did there seem to be interest from those police officers in hearing what the issue is, right? You know, like having the conversation, sitting down with someone to say, like, let's talk about this, right? Like,
Yeah.
was there that happening? Did anyone, I know there are many who didn't, but was there anyone who was interested in doing that? Or was it them taking the hard line of, I'm a police officer and this is what we do?
Well, the department actually held a series of dialogues with officers to kind of educate and bring out ideas and kind of talk about the other side, like, hey, here's a while that people are protesting, so on and so forth. My interactions, very few wanted to say, no one put me to the side like, hey, why the brothers out there protesting? What are they mad at? You know, very few did that. And when we would engage in conversation, when I would say, hey, the people are out there protesting not because, again, not because they're, you know, mad at you, they don't hate you, they're mad at a system. And this is a bigger picture and it goes back 400 years.
Yeah.
And after I said my piece, then they would say, well, you know what? They're out there saying, they're up there holding the sign saying stop police brutality. So as far as I'm concerned, they don't like me. And nobody wanted to go deeper. And, you know, whether it goes back to, you know, we can say it started with Colin Kaepernick, you know, all these, the racial divide got bigger and bigger. And just because it's a police department doesn't mean it didn't affect us at the department. And that was frustrating. And let me say this, the cops still went out and did a good job. They still went out and protected and served and did their job. But that empathy part is what we're missing. And I don't think that people were dug in so much that they didn't even take a chance to realize that, you know, these people are good people. They're not out here, you know, you saw the rioting and burning down police stations stuff. Those people, in my opinion, they didn't care about, you know, racial injustice. They just wanted to riot and loot. The other people, the majority of the people who were there, just wanted to expand their freedom of speech, their freedom to protest and go home, be secure. And that's it. They didn't, but it seems like it got connected that if you were out here at these protests, that you were a rioter. And that wasn't true. I had so many people that had up signs that said, stop police brutality. And they would say to me, hey, officer, be safe out here. And to me, that says, hey, the sign says one thing, but they really care about my safety and they still support me. So that made me feel comfortable and open. But as far as the officers, a lot of them did not want to look past that. They just saw, hey, you're here protesting police, so that means you don't like me. And they didn't want to go deeper and figure out why or get some common ground or common understanding.
Yeah. And see, and that, for me, that's the problem, which, and you and I have talked about, which is why I asked that question of, are there any of those police officers that even cared to have a conversation, to take it at least 1 to 2 levels down, right? Like, we're not going to solve, you know, 400 years of injustice, right? And white supremacy. We're not going to solve that in a conversation. But to me, that lack of empathy, that lack of, or just, you know, really just digging in and not wanting to, you know, to really hear the pain, right? Like it is, you know, we see Black people, just going back to George Floyd, seeing Black people killed on national television, right? Like that does something to you, that changes you, especially as a Black person, because it's like, that could have been me. That could have been me, that could have been you, that could have been, you know, my best friends. And so, and not having someone who is sworn to protect me, and oh, by the way, our tax dollars pay your salaries, to not even be interested in hearing the other perspective, of just taking that hard line of, you know, no, you just hate police, right? Like, it's it's deeper than that. It's deeper than that. We hate that abuse of power. We hate the bias that, that there are white people that seem to get away with the same or worse than a Black person does, right? Like this is what's baked into that. But when people don't want to take the time to have that conversation, at least that's a huge problem.
I think,
for me,
and you're correct. And I think there is ways that we can, so if I'm talking to a partner one-on-one, because, police department is like any other job, you got your groups and your cliques. So if I have someone one-on-one, I think I can get through to them, or at least make, show, educate them a little bit. And that's, been my, mantra, that every time I get a few minutes to kind of share kind of the background. I also think that if on the police department, you had people that would explain there's some white and Hispanic officers that I talked to, and they says, I have an understanding because I took a class, or I heard a professor, and you have to get out. You don't want an officer in uniform. You want them relaxed, kind of like a seminar, and you explain everything. And I think that would help. On a police department, you have 10,000 people. You have to train. That's going to take, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. It's going to take time. You have to take an officer out the street. So logistically, that's hard to do. But if we can just get one, and I think the dialogues that we're doing at the police academy with the recruits actually will help, because they get a chance to bring community members in to speak with these recruits before they even hit the street. So the one that you went to, those officers, they haven't even been on the streets yet, but they get a chance to hear from community members and, tell them, hey, this is our neighborhood. This is what we want to see from our police officers that patrol our neighborhood. And it kind of gives them a perspective. And also, with policing, you have people, depending on their background, they have no diversity in their background. They play football, I had a couple Black teammates on the football team, and that's it. And we need to maybe incorporate that more, so people aren't, when they're going into a Black person's house on a radio call, that's not the first time they go to someone's house, that don't look like them. So I think there's ways that, police departments, other police departments, any department can try to achieve that, because we still, until we get past this, we're always going to have these problems. So we had the 1965 riots, 1992, and now we jump off to 2022.
2020, yeah.
So 2020. So we, if the people that if they really want change, they have to put their money where their mouth is, and they have to really fight for it. They can't just, when they get in front of a camera or up for re-election, say all the right things and then disappear after that.
Right. Yeah. And yes, as there are so many pieces to this puzzle. Thank you for indulging me, because I really had wanted to hear that perspective. And I always love hearing, your thoughts on some of these issues that are really tough and painful, and really, are causing divides in families and friendships and communities and workplaces. So thank you for letting me go.
No, I enjoyed it. And, one of the things that, we talked about is that nobody came to the experts. We're Black and we're police officers. We should have been the first call to be like, hey, what's going on here? What do you guys think? Nobody came to us. And we felt some kind of way about it. It's like, dude, you guys are out there, protesting. You guys are out there putting plans together to combat riots. Dude, come to us. We can tell you.
So Rashad, are you specific? Who are you talking about? Like the people who organize the protest? Are you talking about who, when you're saying you didn't come to the experts?
Yes,
who are you talking about?
I'm talking about both. I'm talking about the higher ups in the police department, and I'm talking about the community members. We are with you guys. We understand
Yeah.
why you're doing. As long as you guys aren't, looting and starting fires,
Mm-hmm.
I'm with you. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
But and I think having a voice, to have African American officers to say, hey, I'm an officer, but I'm going to take a knee. I'm an officer, but I'm going to say what happened to George Floyd was wrong. I think that would go a long way, because that's what people are saying. It's like, oh, the police don't care. No, we care. I can't tell you about the other 90% of the department, but me and my partner, 2 Black officers, we care, we understand, and we don't have any problem with people exercising their First Amendment right. But
and
our voices were not heard.
Do you feel, I mean, you've been doing Days of Dialogue for a while, and and I know that you take these officers aside and have those tough conversations. Do you feel at liberty? Do you feel free to speak your mind in other forms? I mean, we're doing it here, but do you feel free to speak your mind in other forms? Because I have talked to other officers who don't necessarily feel that. So, and I mean, you have more time under your belt, so you know how to do it, but just curious if you feel free to speak up.
I feel free. I felt free because I was a tenured officer.
Yeah.
I knew what to say.
Mm-hmm.
I had the courage to be able to say these things. Mm-hmm. Not everybody is in the position to do that, and they are afraid of repercussion, whether from the department, whether from their fellow officers. Mm-hmm. And everything we record. So when I started the police department, we barely had radios. Now we have body cams. Now every time you go on a call, someone's out there with a video camera. Mm-hmm. And one word, next thing you know, it's all over the papers and the media and things. So people are real hesitant to say that, to say what's on their mind. During the Days of Dialogue, we tell them this is not recorded. We say it to both sides, because we want the open and honest dialogue. And we're talking about Days of Dialogue, but it can be any dialogue, as long as there's respect. And that's always our first rule, is respect for each other. And so I think there's a way that the officers could open up, but it's a fear, and they don't feel comfortable. And before we go into dialogue with the community, I put the officers aside, and the first thing I say is that these people are here. So that means that if they hated the police and they didn't want to be around you, they wouldn't be here. Right. So there was that fear of the officers saying, hey, I'm going to go out here in the community and talk with these people that hate us. And I said, I guarantee you, if after this, come to me and tell me, you know what, I still feel the same. I still think these people hate us. And after they come back and like, oh, that was good. I really enjoyed it. We should do more of them. And these are from non-Black officers. Yeah. Because they got a chance. And that's what it is on both sides. The police officers get to hear from these community members, because it's different talking to someone when you have a badge on a gun and you're on a radio call, than sitting down, having a cup of coffee, chopping it up. Yeah. And you really, everyone's guard is let down, and you find out, oh man, you're the same sports fan as me, or you got kids too. You find we have more in common than we don't. So, I wish we could open up more, have more officers open up more, and just try the process, because it's almost like a simple, like, you understand, just because I don't look like you, I understand you. Right. And because you see whatever it is you see on TV, or the color of someone's skin, you already have those barriers in. You can't, you don't get to that point. And it's like, as a kid, when you're younger kids, they maybe about 8 or 9, they realize a different color. But before then, 4 or 5, you go to a daycare, right? You see all these babies playing together and everything. They don't have They don't care what color those people are. So how do we as adults get back to that, to where we only look at what's inside the person and not what's outside?
So you talked about this, you mentioned this earlier, so we're gonna go to we're talking about courage permission slip, so you already started segueing into this. So when you think of the word courage, what does that mean to you?
It's not letting fear overtake you. It's not worried about repercussion. But you have to be confident in what you're doing. So if I'm never fixed a ceiling fan, I'm scared to fix it because I don't know electricity gonna kill me or I'm gonna get shocked or something like that. But if I know, hey, I turned off the power, now it's not as scary because I know however I mess it up, I just go back to Home Depot or whatever, but I know I'm not gonna get shocked. So in life, we have to, figure that out. Like, I'm not gonna let this fear, or I'm not gonna, being comfortable with who you are. In that particular case, we're talking about being in the dialogues and me speaking my mind. I'm comfortable with who I am. So the fear in that would be, what about if you say something that, hey, police make mistakes, and your partner hears you talking and they're saying, oh, you know what? Rashad, he just says, cops are bad, or, then you get ostracized at work. That's the fear. The courage part is being able to say what's on your mind. And then if someone comes to you and said, hey, I heard you said this, I can say, yes, this is what I said. This is what I meant by it. And if you like, we can go have a cup of coffee and we can discuss it even more. But you have to get to that point to where you're comfortable within yourself and you're confident. Because if you're not confident, you're still going to have fear. But, the courage is just getting past that and, thinking things ahead and feeling comfortable. I would say that, just being comfortable with who you are.
And so thinking about some specific situations, because I'm sure you've had many, can you think of a situation where you felt that fear, but you gave yourself permission to move forward anyway?
Yes. And confident in your craft. If you're a comedian, you ran over your jokes, they're funny. Whether those people laugh or not, doesn't matter. You still have to do it. You have to make yourself do it. So in the situations that I was in, I knew what I was doing was ultimately right. And I'll just go over, there was a use of force. Officer was getting into it with a member of the public, and I stepped in. And the other guys were on me. How could you do that? You don't do that in front of officers. You let the officers handle. And I said, look, I was trying to save you. I was trying to save this person. And they were not nice to me. There was a few friendships broken up over that, but I knew what I was doing was right. And I didn't care because I know what I did was right. And I felt comfortable in myself and be willing to take the heat afterwards. So one or two people, they would, and I even told the supervisor, hey, this is why I did that. And he's like, all right, I understand why you did it. And that was it. But, that's just one case in law enforcement. You could have courage. I guess fear and courage depends on each person's situation. Hey, can we afford this house? What you have to, should we move to another state? All those things. But if you feel it within you and you're making the right decision. Now, don't make a rash decision like, hey, I'm getting up and I'm moving to Mexico tomorrow. Well, where are you gonna live? Oh, I don't know. No, that's not being courage. That's just being, I don't want to say stupid, but hey, you got to work some things out before you do that. But, planning, make sure that, you think things through. As you know, young people, a lot of times, I'm gonna sneak out the house. Well, dude, you can fall out, sneak out the second story window, you can get in the car, all these things that at a young age you don't think about. As an adult,
Right.
we're able to think about those things and figure out, is this a right decision? Is this a safe decision? And if you take those factors out of it, you kind of lessen the fear. I'm not going to be homeless if I make this decision. My kids still have a place to live if I make this decision. Those small things, now your fear level starts to come down.
Yeah.
And that's all you want. You're always going to have some fear, whether it's walking out your house or, what TV show you watch. You're always going to have some fear, but it's just a way of mitigating those fears to where you're able to handle it however it turns out, and being comfortable with the decision that you made.
And thank you for sharing that situation where you stepped in between the officer and the citizen, where there was a use of force involved. And I think that is, just thinking of myself as a civilian, we always wonder, like, why are you guys not stepping in when this stuff is going down, right? Like, not to keep using this example, but it's the most visible example that everyone can recall of George Floyd. Like, why didn't the other officers, say, like, yo, fall back, right? Like, is that necessary, right? And so, in that moment that you stepped in, did you do the quick rundown of, okay, if I do this, I know I'm gonna get the business from my fellow officers? Did you run through that, or you just were solely focused on, this is the right thing to do, period?
Everything. And it's funny that, when I've kind of told the story, I never thought back to the George Floyd, and obviously my situation wasn't as egregious as that. But when I went over there, I kind of looked at the corner of my eye and see these two guys going at it. And I says, oh, I know that guy. I can handle this on my own. As I'm going in the middle, stepping between, in my mind, I was like, oh, shoot, these guys are going to be, they're going to think that my fear was that they says, you care more about the suspect than you did your fellow officer. And that kind of was in the back of my mind. But once I was in, I was like, I'm in, I have to do this. So that kind of crossed your mind, but I was sure I was on good ground. Good ground. There's certain, and kind of back on your point, is that a lot of times people do step in. It's just, not publicized.
Right, that doesn't make the news.
There are, I can remember an incident, this is in the 90s, where an officer was engaged in use of force with the suspect, and his own partner, both these officers was white, and his own partner like put him off, like, hey dude, let the guy go, he's down. And that was, nothing came of that. Like, there was no, I don't think the guy went back and told his partner, hey, let me handle it my way. They were partners again the next day. So, it can happen. And, it was not just, I didn't step in because I was Black or the race of the officers and the citizen. It was just because it was the right thing to do. And I know I was in a position to handle it. Had I not stepped in, the guy wouldn't have died, but it would have been a bigger deal than it was. So that's when, you're inside, when it just kicks in that, hey, I can stop a wrong. I'm going to do it. And that was it. I didn't have time to think. It was in the back of my mind, but I didn't hesitate.
Right. The doing the right thing was more important than that fear of retribution or what have you. And speaking of fears, so, now you have shifted into reserve officer status, but I'm curious to hear from you, like, what fears are popping up for you now or recently?
Hey, you got kids. So your kid, that's your kids, they get older, And, my oldest daughter is 30 years old, and I still want her to call me, hey, call me when you get home from the club or whatever, when you get home from work. You always have those fears. Your future, whether, hey, do I have enough money to live in retirement? What's going to happen in this country, from, in 30 years, my grandkids, where does all this come? It's a lot of things that I have no control over, but it's still that anxiety and that fear is still there. And, some things I do have control over. Hey, do I really need to go to Whole Foods, or can I just go to the local store and get, I really need these organic grapes, things like that. But, again, if you go through your steps, well, let me check my account. Okay, I got enough to get those grapes. I may not have them next week, but I got it now. Go through these, but you're always going to have, there's always going to be something, in your life that, you have to overcome and get that courage. Someone says, oh, police officers are courageous. And we don't like to hear that word because we just feel we're doing our job. I don't think I'm courageous. I don't think, someone says, well, you guys go into danger and most people run away. Well, that's my job. That's what I want to do. So I don't look at it being courageous. It's just that you can't let fear overtake you. So when I talk to young people about being a police officer, I tell them you can't be scared and you can't let fear overtake you. I don't say, you don't have fear, because you're always gonna have fear. Right. But you have to account for your training, your experience, your, honing your craft. That's why I can chase the guy down a dark alley. Because of that, not because there's no fear involved, not because I'm not scared, but because I feel confident in myself that I can achieve my goal of taking this, suspect into custody. So otherwise, because if you have fear, you wouldn't get out the police car.
Right. Well, and so thinking about that, and I was having this conversation, and some other guests have mentioned this, where just like what you were saying, in the moment, they don't feel courageous. In the moment, they're not thinking about, I'm being really brave right now. They're thinking, similar to what you said, I just need to do this, right? Like the alternative of not making a move or not taking action does not work for me. So I just have to do this. But when they take a step back, and sometimes that step back didn't come until we were having this conversation, but then going through it in that moment, they're like, oh, well, now that I think about it, I mean, from the outside looking in, that was courageous. But in the moment, I didn't think of that. And so as you sit and think back over some of those situations that you've been in, does it feel courageous, or do you still go back to that moment of, or that thought of, well, I was just doing what I needed to do in that moment?
Well, the courageous, everything that I have done, there have been civilians that's done it. They went into buildings and, rescued people. So it's not just police officers. And I think back, it's like, wow, that was pretty good. I can think back to a couple, incidents. And at the moment, yes, it was courageous, but at the moment I just did it. And that was my job. I didn't hesitate. And just because my courageousness may deal with life and death doesn't mean that other people's courageousness is not as important. And so it's hard to, I don't want people to think, oh, well, of course, that's courageous because, the guy had a gun, or, you saved the baby from getting hit by a car. But you have to put everything in perspective. When, you take a job that, you should be making more, but because you want to achieve a goal, that's being courageous. I'm going to take this little, whatever dollar an hour job because I have a goal. And this job is going to help me get to that point. That's being courageous. Putting your kid in a private school and barely able to afford the rent, that's like, dude, you're doing it for your family, for a long-term goal.
Yeah.
That's courageous, because you can just send them to public school and like, hey, I can still, go to the movies every weekend or whatever. I'm not using my money on my kids. No, you put your kids first, you put your family first. So those are ways that people can look at it. It doesn't just mean, stepping in front of somebody where somebody's shooting a gun. It can be other things in your life. And I think because the majority of the people aren't police officers, but they still have, courage, and they still make sacrifices. And I guess courage is kind of a sacrifice, right? You're having courage because whether you're sacrificing your body, you're sacrificing your paycheck, you sacrifice taking the bus to work so your wife can take the car, all those things, courageous.
Yeah. Well, and I remember a guest who pointed out that she feels like courageousness really does happen. There's big courage, like what you and I have talked about in certain instances in this conversation, but there's smaller acts of courage that are still, when you're looking at, the scale of what someone is doing, are still really big acts of courage, like leaving a career that doesn't work for you, right? Not burning yourself out and making the decision to take a break, right? To take a vacation, even though that could mean letting people down. It could mean retribution, depending on where people are working. But yeah, I mean, courageousness, I feel like, is scalable, right? I mean, there are things, there's big, like you said, life and death courage, but then there's like everyday life courage of deciding that that you want to go in a different direction, or that you're going to speak up for yourself, or you're, as you said, like you're going to advocate for yourself at a job, knowing that I deserve more money, or, I want to delegate to someone to help me so that I'm not burning out and working, 15 hours a day. So courage does absolutely happen in smaller, everyday moments that probably don't feel courageous in the moment, but when you look back, you're like, ooh, that could have not worked out for me.
Yeah, it went the other way.
Yes. Are there any places where you are having to give yourself permission to step out of your comfort zone now?
Besides this podcast, right? We're not talking about this.
This could be a conversation about comfort zone.
Well, working at a job for 32 years and then deciding to hang it up, that's it's an unknown. People say, oh, you're gonna be retired, it's gonna be great, but I don't know that. What if all of a sudden the stock market crashes, the city, and I no longer have a pension? I don't know. There's a lot of unknown when you've been doing something for so long. I've been a police officer, for more than half my life. And I don't know if I'm going to know how to be a regular citizen. Like, hey, we talked about a reserve officer. So just for Los Angeles, reserve officer means that, and you don't have to be retired. Anyone can be a reserve officer. It just means you go in and you work a couple shifts a month, help out. And there's different levels of it. So, working 1 or 2 days a month, is that gonna give me the same, I guess, feeling of being a police officer that it was for full time for 32 years? I don't know, but I have to do it. I want to spend, more time with my family, especially my kids, and I'm doing it. I don't know if I can afford to do it, but I'm doing it because I feel that it's time. And the good thing that can come out of it overtakes that fear.
Yeah.
The fact that I get to spend a lot more time with my kids I don't care if I have to eat top ramen. I'm doing it because I want to see,
Right.
I want to
Right.
spend time with them. And
Right.
especially, being a police officer, I wasn't there for every event,
Yeah.
every school recital and
Yeah.
things like that. And
Yeah.
now it's time. I want to do it before I get too old and can't do anything. So I give myself permission to retire and to look for that next chapter in my
Yeah.
life.
Well, and so you saying that, right, of it being really important to you, to be able to spend time with your family, and you missed moments along the way, and so now you don't want to miss those moments anymore. And it just, there's a lot of definitions of courage, and I think about the gentleman's name is escaping me, but he's a professor, and the way that he described courage is that it's a deliberate choice in the face of fearful, painful circumstances, in pursuit of a worthy goal, right? And so the goal for you is spending time with your family, and that is more important to you than the potential circumstances, a la eating top ramen, right? Like I'll put down some top ramen if it means that I get that family time, right?
Right.
And so yeah, and in the face of not knowing what that could bring, right? A tighter budget, or not being able to do some of the things that you enjoyed previously. But all of that is worth the sacrifice. And so, so I really appreciate you sharing that and being honest about that, and, kind of what, what the fear is of doing that. But, there's consequences for every choice, right? So, and you're just choosing the alternative. So,
Yes.
so I really, really appreciate that. Rashad, this has been so amazing, and you have shared so many gems, but I'm curious to hear from you to share your guidance for that person who is listening to this conversation, and they have a dream or a goal or a vision for their life, but fear, and maybe those circumstances are too big, they're more important than the goal that they have. What guidance do you want to give that person so that they can move forward?
So the saying goes, how do you eat a whale? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So when it comes to making a decision, how do we go about making sure it adds up? Because there's some things like, I want to do this job and I'm scared of it. Okay, let's see if we can figure out how to get there. And after we run the numbers on it, and it says, you know what, that job is not achievable. The risk is too high. So you always want to have something that you can figure out. What's the worst can happen? Okay, I'm gonna move out to New York and I'm gonna try to go on Broadway. I know that there's a chance that I will fail, but I'm okay with that. I'd rather have a chance to go out and do it than to be sitting at home thinking, man, I could have been a star. I have friends that come up to me like, you know what, I wanted to be a cop, but I didn't, I was in school, I was making this amount of money, so on and so forth. I have friends on this job that actually took pay cuts to be a police officer. They took a pay cut because that was their dream. And they had the same thing, like, man, I'm, losing this money, but that was their dream. And they were not gonna stop at it. My dream, as I said, always to be a police officer. I did have a backup plan, but that backup plan meant 4 more years of college. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna do whatever it takes to be an officer,
Yeah.
So I'm one of those person, you tell me what I need to do to achieve this goal, and I'm gonna do it. So if they say, hey, you gotta be able to run 10 miles. Okay, see you in 10 years, but I'm gonna be able to run those 10 miles at some point. So if you have a goal, if that's really what you want, you have to go for it. Just do it smartly. Don't mortgage your house and go to Vegas and put it all on black. No, nothing goes without hard work.
Yeah.
And sacrifice.
Yes.
And I guess that's all putting, that fear all together. Like, what is it that you want to achieve? How can you go about doing it? What are the steps you're going to do? And being okay with the outcome.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the fear, they worried about the outcome. Well, you don't know the outcome until you at least get in the game a little bit.
That's right. That's right.
Something.
You can't win if you don't play.
Yep. And do not let someone else discourage you.
Ooh, yeah.
Because, if, I told you, and now let me say my dad, he's happy with my career. Things are great. But I could have said, well, my dad don't want me to be a cop, so I ain't gonna be a cop. Where my life, would have been. But I would have been.
And then you'd always be wondering what if. You'd always be wondering
yes.
what if. And that, and the pain of regret.
That can be worse than the
regret.
That can be worse than the fear.
That's right.
I would encourage people to follow their dreams, go after what they want. I wanted to be, if I wasn't gonna be a cop, I wanted to be a rapper. I was infatuated with LL Cool J, Run DMC. I couldn't rap, but I wanted that. But
wait, what's your favorite? So what's your favorite? Now I'm totally off the rails now, but what's your favorite? So since you said LL, what's your favorite song of LL Cool J's?
Okay. Favorite. Okay, it's got to be off the Bigger and Deffer album, and it was all right. I can't remember the name of that song, but I say off the.
What's the lyric?
My favorite LL song is the one the Kumo D diss. The Kumo D diss. Okay, I got a brain freeze, but it's the one with is the one he's dissing Kumo D, and they go back and forth because Kumo D did How You Like Me Now.
Yes.
And then LL Cool J came out with some How You Like Me Now. Yeah, Jack the Ripper. It's called Jack the Ripper.
Oh my gosh.
I think it came out in 89, 90, 91, something like that.
That took me all the way back. I was sitting at the radio because I remember when we knew it was coming out, I was sitting at the radio with my little micro cassette recorder. You remember those little things with the little, and recorded it so that I could have the diss songs on tape. Oh my God.
So that was the best.
I'm aging myself now.
80s and 90s, best for music. And I'm a big total 80s fan. Bananarama, Jay Giles Band, whatever it is, whatever they played in the 80s. I mean, now I don't even listen to the radio because I have a station full of 80s or old school hip hop.
Yes. One of my favorite stations.
I did go after my dream of being a rapper, but it was in the back of my mind. But but I thought it out. And I went to my friends and said, hey, how does this rap sound? They says, oh, dude, you're terrible. So that was it. But at least I took that one step. I took that one step forward.
That's right. Right. You wrote some lyrics, you tested it out, didn't work. Okay, I'm gonna go with my first plan.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. Oh, Rashad, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for, really going there and having this conversation about something that really is, it's a hot topic and will remain to be a hot topic that, is probably not going to get solved in our lifetime. So really, really thankful to you for joining and being a part of this. If people want to get in touch with you, how can they get in touch with you?
They can email me. Rashad Sharif at iCloud.com. And a plug for LAPD, they do accept volunteers or reserves. So people can go on LAPD volunteers or LAPD reserve officers, and they can look if they're interested in that. But send me an email, I'll be happy to talk to anyone. And Kia, they can get a hold of you and they can find whatever. I'm around. I'm not going anywhere.
Yes.
I'm gonna be
Or
around.
reach out to me and
Yes.
I will put you in touch with Rashad.
Yeah.
But I will include the information in the show notes anyway.
All right.
But Rashad, thank you so much. This was so great that we got to do this and have this conversation.
Kia, I'm so happy. I'm glad I got to see you. And we'll have to meet in person and maybe we can do another podcast in person.
Maybe. Well, you know, and that when I first wanted to start my show, that was actually the plan. It was going to be an in-person interview. And then, you know, then COVID hit and, you know, here we are. So
get the shot,
Zoom.
people, get the shot.
Yes. All right, everyone. Well, again, Rashad, thank you. And thank you for listening or watching wherever you are taking in this content. Really, thank you for listening to our conversation. And just a reminder to make your dreams bigger and more important than your fears. Until the next Courage Permission Slip episode, thank you. Bye now.